sea monkeys versus aqua dragons.
Today we're putting them head to head to find out what their differences are, which is better, and most importantly, which option should you choose. For those unfamiliar, sea monkeys and aqua dragons are two different brands that produce brine shrimp pet products designed as an affordable, low maintenance aquatic pet, and each offers several options in their product lineups. So to keep things simple, I'm going to compare two very similar kits from each brand that sit in a similar price range. That being the Ocean Treasure from Sea Monkeys and the Underwater World from Aqua Dragons. Before we take a look at these two products and set them up, it's important for us to understand the history of each brand and their relationship with the brine shrimp hobby, as the contrast between the two of them is quite stark. Sea Monkeys is by far the older of the two, getting their start in the late 1950s. They're the ones who essentially conceptualized the whole idea of keeping brine shrimp as pets. They've had a lot of ups and downs in that time, but against all odds, they're still a popular toy today. Over the last 60 plus years, the brand has become a household name and is well known in pop culture, both for its quirks and also its infamous marketing, which has been at times misleading to say the least. For many people though, they've developed a nostalgic connection with the Sea Monkeys brand, and their products represent a core link to their childhood. Aqua Dragons by comparison is much newer, getting its start in 2012. After more than a decade in the market, they've now established themselves as a strong staple in this product niche, and their brine shrimp kits have quickly become some of the most popular in the world. And they really are a worldwide brand, being sold on every continent except Antarctica. Aqua Dragons are also well known for the variety in their product lineup, with several tank designs and features that continue to push the creative limits of this hobby. So this is the first place where the two brands differ. With Sea Monkeys you have heritage, and with Aqua Dragons modernity. Both brands take a similar approach with their marketing by using creepy illustrated characters to breathe some imagination into their products. Sea Monkeys is perhaps most well known in this regard. Their pink anthropomorphic artemia with 3 antennae emanating from their heads have become quite famous at this point, even featuring in their own live-action TV show in 1992. The show only ran for 11 episodes, and predictably wasn't picked up for a second season. Aqua Dragons take a less fanciful artistic direction. The characters resemble something not too far off actual brine shrimp, though obviously with the dragon-like influence in their design. While Aqua Dragons haven't yet had their own TV show, they do currently have a game that you can download in the App Store, which is an interesting mix of an RPG and a side-scroller. Now on to the kits themselves. The Sea Monkey set comes with a small info booklet. This is actually an older one which has been recently updated to this one here. It has some great general info and care tips, as well as some world-class brine shrimp microscopy taken by yours truly. Sea Monkey sets always come with 3 pouches: water purifier, instant live eggs and growth food, conveniently numbered 1, 2 and 3. The contents of these isn't quite as simple as what's written on the front though, with the microscope giving us some more insight. Packet number 1, the water purifier, is mostly just various salts, but it also contains spherical brown sea monkey eggs. Packet number 2, the instant live eggs, is very similar to the first, salt with more eggs, but there's also greeny blue particles in here as well. I assume these are small pieces of food, or perhaps water-soluble dye, or possibly even a mixture of the two. The growth food packet is also really interesting, but we'll take a closer look at that when we get around to actually feeding our sea monkeys. And for that we'll be using this small yellow feeding spoon. While its scoop is incredibly small, it's actually the perfect size. More elaborate sea monkey kits, such as this Ocean Treasure set, also come with a water pump tool, which is basically just for aerating your tank water to give the sea monkeys more oxygen. But this tool isn't included with some of the lower budget sets like the Ocean Zoo, so that's important to keep in mind. Aqua Dragons on the other hand takes a slightly more simple approach with their packets, where they only have 2, one with the salt and eggs, and the other with the Aqua Dragon food. Microscopic footage of this egg packet shows us that it's pretty much as described. The salt and egg packet contains, well, salt and Aqua Dragon eggs. Just as with the sea monkey growth food, we'll take a closer look at this Aqua Dragon food once our pets are ready for their first feeding, for which we'll be using this included spoon. Aqua Dragons produces this spoon in various different colours depending on which set you're using, but most often, like with this kit, it's green. The more elaborate Aqua Dragon kits also include a small pipette to manually oxygenate the tank water. These are also useful tools for moving smaller Aqua Dragons around, so it's always nice when they're included.
Next up are the tanks. Over the last 60 years, sea monkeys have seen a huge variety of tanks with differing gimmicks, several of which I've reviewed on the channel and have grown quite fond of. They even have additional oddities like racetracks that let you race your brine shrimp, and wearables like watches and necklaces that allow you to take your pets with you on the go. The end of the 20th century was a wild time. Today the sea monkey product range is still quite diverse, with designs that have become well known for their high quality. The dome-shaped Magic Castle and Mars aquariums are their two themed tanks, while the Ocean Volcano and Ocean Zoo offer more simple options. The tank we'll be taking a look at today though is one of their newer additions, the Ocean Treasure. This flat tank is around 300 ml in volume, has a coloured base and lid, and a textured rocky substrate on the bottom with the treasure chest ornaments sitting atop it. The tank walls also have the famous magnifying bubbles, which make this design instantly recognisable as a sea monkey product. Aqua Dragons by comparison has an equally impressive product range. Despite their short 10-year history, it's quite amazing to see just how many tanks they've managed to produce. They have several that are quite simple in design, everything from an egg-shaped aquarium to the sleek hatch and grow tank, which is a minimalist's dream. Their newest tank, the Aqua Dragons Volcano, has really taken things up a notch, with an internal rotating light, and even lava food which turns your pets red. This underwater world tank is quite simple though. It's also around 300 ml, and just like the Ocean Treasure, its shape is quite two-dimensional. This increases the surface area, which allows the tank to get more light, promoting the growth of beneficial microalgae, as well as making it easier to watch your pets as they swim around. My one gripe with this tank is fortunately something that can be easily solved. The decorative coral tank wrap is simply just a plastic covering which can be carefully removed with a small knife. You need to be diligent, but with a bit of finesse it comes off cleanly. This small modification gives you access to a second, larger lid, which can be beneficial if you plan on using aquarium accessories with your setup. You need to be careful with this step too, as that second lid has to be gently cracked off. The setup for these kits is pretty straightforward, with there being just one clear difference between the two. Both require adding 300 ml of water into the tanks, which are conveniently marked by a water level fill line. The instructions for both kits recommend using bottled water, so I'm using spring water for both tanks to keep the comparison consistent. This next step is where the two brands diverge. Sea Monkeys has a water purifier packet, and also a separate egg packet which is supposed to be added into the tank 24 hours after the water purifier. This extra step is just some unnecessary tomfoolery to trick you into thinking your sea monkeys have hatched instantly, when in reality you're just seeing the babies from the eggs that were in the water purifier. With this in mind, it's fine just to add both packets in at the same time. Aqua Dragons takes a simpler approach, without the playful deception. All of their eggs and salt are bundled into one pouch. I honestly prefer this, as it eliminates the chances of people getting confused about what to do. It's spring here at the moment, so I don't have to worry too much about the water temperature for these two tanks, but I will be using an under tank heat mat to make sure I keep them in the ideal range around 26 degrees Celsius or 79 degrees Fahrenheit. It'll only take a day or two for these guys to start hatching, so I'll check back in with you in a few days so we can have a look at which of these two products has a higher hatch rate. Morning guys, today is day 3 and our babies have now all hatched, and the difference between the two tanks is stark. This is pretty much in line with my experience of these products in the past, where Aqua Dragons has clearly put a lot more eggs into their pouch. In fact, judging by these hatch rates, it looks like they've got around 10 times more eggs, which is pretty staggering. Remember though that the goal here is to establish a healthy colony of adult brine shrimp, not simply just to hatch a bunch of babies. So while it appears that Aqua Dragons currently have the upper hand, don't count out the sea monkeys quite yet. It looks like all of the babies are swimming well, which is a good indicator that they're healthy. I'll update again in a few days so we can take a look at the food packets under the microscope and give our little pets their first meals. Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're doing better than me because I've been down with a cold for the last week, so I'm a little late on this update. But nevertheless, here we are. Today's day 12 and the sea monkeys and Aqua Dragons are both doing really well. They're now entering what I call the teenage stage, where the difference between the males and females starts to become more obvious. An accumulation of gunk is beginning to form at the bottom of the tanks too. This is a build-up of discarded exoskeletons, algae, microorganisms, and of course plenty of poop, which these shrimp are producing in spades. And no, what you're seeing here isn't unusually long tails, but rather just long strands of poop, so they're clearly eating well. The difference in numbers between these two tanks is still really obvious, with there being a lot more aqua dragons than sea monkeys, but it seems the sea monkeys might be growing ever so slightly faster for now. Before we take a look at our pint-sized pets under the microscope though, I first want to look at the food that each kit comes with. For sea monkeys, that's packet number 3, which they call growth food. And while the back of this pouch says that it contains assorted ground vegetable powder, I believe what we're most likely looking at here is kelp powder, basically just ground up seaweed. It has a strong matcha green tea smell that I actually quite like, but perhaps that's just an acquired taste that I've developed over the years as a brine shrimp food connoisseur. And yes, there's also salt and sea monkey eggs in this pouch as well. Sneaky. Sea monkey kits suggest feeding for the first time around day 5 with 1 level scoop of the yellow feeding spoon. I personally think this is a little too much for sea monkeys this small, so I prefer to take the approach of smaller but regular micro feedings instead. Moving on to the aqua dragon food, and you'll notice that this one looks quite different. It also has some salt crystals, but the bulk of the food is a dark green powder, which I assume is most likely powdered chlorella or spirulina. Both of these are a dried algae species which are packed full of nutrients, making them good options for brine shrimp. There's also something that looks like orange coloured salt crystals. I'm not really sure, maybe it's a Himalayan salt or something. The back of this packet recommends feeding your aqua dragons for the first time 1 day after they hatch, using their teal coloured spoon. Again, regular micro feedings are a safer option here, especially for these juveniles. It reduces the chance of accidentally overfeeding your colony, which is a big risk when they're this young. Aqua dragon food also has a really green tea-like smell to it, but unfortunately the back of the packet says that it's not for human consumption. Like that's ever stopped me. Now, many of you are probably wondering if sea monkeys and aqua dragons are the same animal species, and the truth is, I'm not entirely sure. The older marketing material for sea monkeys said that they were a hybrid brine shrimp species that had been selectively bred in a lab so that they would grow larger and live longer. This is probably just more playful embellishment to excite children, as the feasibility of actually doing this, making a new hybrid species, selectively breeding them for desirable traits, maintaining a colony of them for 50 plus years, and harvesting their eggs to sell in sea monkey kits would be incredibly labour intensive, and honestly just downright difficult. This is all to say that sea monkeys are most likely either just Artemia salina or Artemia franciscana, the 2 most common species of brine shrimp found in North America. The current egg packet now lists Artemia salina eggs as an ingredient, so that's what I'm going with. Aqua dragons on the other hand have always been transparent in their marketing, clearly communicating that they also use Artemia salina eggs. Now something interesting to note is that Artemia salina and franciscana often get confused for each other in scientific literature, so even when you're buying eggs, it's very difficult to know if you're actually getting the species you think you are. The main difference between the two is apparently their size, with salina being the larger of the two. We'll have to wait and see how big these guys grow to get an idea of which species they might be. Alright, that's all for today's update. I'm going to leave these tanks to do their thing, and give you another update in a month or 2 when our sea monkeys and aqua dragons are both fully mature. We'll get a good look at the adults under the microscope, and I'll give you my final verdict between which of these 2 brands you should go for. Hey guys, it's been a couple of months since we last had a look at these tanks, and that's because I wanted to spend a bit of time with them so I could give you a well thought out, definitive review for each brand. Both colonies are now fully established, with plenty of adults in each tank, and also the second generation which appear to be growing well. You'll notice the tanks do look very different from one another though, both in how the brine shrimp look and also what's growing on the bottom. So let's take a closer look at what's going on. We'll start first with the Sea Monkey's Ocean Treasure. The adults in here have grown quite large, and there's somewhere around 15 of them now. While this isn't anywhere near as many as what's in the Aqua Dragon's tank, these sea monkeys definitely look a little bigger. I'm sure you've also seen that the bottom of this tank looks a murky brown colour. I know this gives the impression that it might be grimy, and it's certainly not particularly pretty to look at, but that brown muck is actually a really good sign. It means there's an abundance of diatoms growing in the tank. Diatoms are a class of microalgae that differ from regular green algae in several ways, most notably their colour, which is a radiant golden brown, but also in their structure, where they have a rigid silica-based cell wall. Many species, including the one growing in the sea monkey tank, are also radially and bilaterally symmetrical, making them rather pretty to view under the microscope. Diatoms are motile too, meaning they're able to move about as they please. It's difficult to say exactly why this culture has established so strongly in this tank, but I suspect it's something to do with that plastic ornament in here giving them plenty of surface area to latch onto. It's almost as if the treasure contained within that chest is this golden algae, which is rather poetic. Moving on to the aqua dragons, and gadzooks is it busy in here. What's most impressive about these kits is not only how many hatch, but also how many manage to survive. Usually, big hatch rates are a bad omen for a tank's longevity, but the aqua dragons are doing really well. As I mentioned, these ones are definitely a little smaller than the sea monkeys, being around 2/3 their size. I don't know if this means they're actually a different species, or if the size discrepancy here is simply due to food and other resource availability. Apparently the increase in average adult human height we've seen over the last few decades can be largely attributed to better nutrition, so perhaps something similar is happening here. Regardless, the aqua dragons all look very healthy. I'm sure you've noticed their tank is a very different colour too, this one looking more green. There's no diatoms growing in here, but rather a healthy culture of cyanobacteria. This green microalgae is more closely related to the terrestrial plants that we're familiar with, and they differ from diatoms in that they have a flexible cell wall made of cellulose. The species in this tank doesn't appear to be motile, so they kinda just follow the water's current. The reason I like to emphasize algae and microorganisms so much in my videos is because I'm trying to underline their importance. These species are the foundations of these ecosystems, and their growth is the main reason why I have such an easy time with my colonies. I have a few videos talking about how to promote their growth, so go check those out after you finish watching this one. So, who wins? Should you buy sea monkeys, or should you get aqua dragons? Well, both brands produce a high quality product, and you can find success using either of them if you take the right steps. Aqua dragons are guaranteed to give you a higher hatch rate, so if it's quantity you're looking for, they're definitely the better option here. Sea monkeys do seem to grow a little larger though, and that's something I've noticed several times in my colonies over the last few years, so if it's size you're after, I'd swing in that direction. Either way, these little guys are sure to capture your heart, and they're great company too. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.